This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
He's Greg, I'm Nick. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Also, you want to eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off. Use code Bedard50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. And finally, Noturno Home Services, Greg's home comfort company. If you're looking for a team that puts your comfort first, visit noturnohome.com/Bedard for 10% off. Your next service could save you up to $1,000. Let's start with baseball, because why not, Greg? Alex Bregman is now a part of the Boston Red Sox roster. News came out late last night. How you feeling about it?
Pretty good. I mean, I like some of their moves, whether it's, Crochet or Walker Buehler in the offseason, but still, you're looking for a right-handed bat. And, while Bregman isn't what he was in his prime, he's still pretty damn good. I think the most important thing is the Red Sox actually spent money for once. I mean, basically $40 million per year for a guy like Bregman. I mean, look, I think it's an overpay, but at least the Red Sox were finally willing to do that. It's something they used to regularly do. They haven't done it in years. So, kudos to them that now I actually might pay attention to a Red Sox season, which is something I haven't done in a long time, or at least it feels that way. I mean, I certainly have some questions. Maybe, you've been reading up on things more than I have, Nick, but where's Bregman going to play? I assume it's going to be second base, and they're going to leave Devers at third base. But, look, the bottom line is the Red Sox functioned like a somewhat real big market team this offseason. And, hallelujah, kudos to them.
Yeah, they spent money. That's the point, right? They spent money. They're a better baseball team because they spent money on Alex Bregman. It does sound like, at least for now, the plan is second base. I think that could change. I think that will be very fluid. I think it will depend on Christian Campbell and how he looks during spring training. And, if they have that conversation with Devers, how he handles that. But we'll see how that unfolds. He makes you better defensively no matter what, though. I mean, even if he's playing second, you've got Story, if Story can stay healthy. Story and Bregman in the middle of your infield is fantastic. Rafaela probably at center. I mean, unless Campbell makes the team. If Campbell makes the club out of spring training, then you move Duran to center and Rafaela becomes your super utility guy, I would think, off the bench. But even if you have Duran in center, so you've got a very, very strong middle of the field defense, which is pivotal in baseball. Connor Wong, not a very strong defensive catcher, but you got Bregman, you got Story, you got Rafaela / Duran. You feel pretty good about that. So, yeah, I mean, they spent money. We wanted them to spend. I thought they were, an 85-win team or so before Bregman. I think they're now going to hover around 87, 88. And that's the difference between you feeling pretty good about your playoff chances. 86 wins could get you into the wild card. So if you were looking at 83 to 85 wins, it's a pretty big difference between 83 and 85 wins and 87, 88 wins. And I think Bregman gets you closer to the latter. All right, let's get to football. The Jets release Aaron Rodgers. And what's interesting, Greg, a part of this, and the Jets released a statement today letting everybody know what we already knew. Jay Glazer reported that Rodgers flew to New Jersey to be told he was not going to be part of the program moving forward. Pretty humbling experience. Diana Rossini of The Athletic reported that Rodgers actually was given an ultimatum. He could have stayed in New York if he decided to no longer take part in the Pat McAfee show, and if he showed up to mandatory practices that were on the schedule. Apparently, Aaron did not want to do one or both of those things. So he decided that, I like my Pat McAfee appearances. I like my money in the back of my pocket. And I don't necessarily want to tell you guys that I'm going to show up to mandatory practices. Just your thoughts about this entire story, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just it's ridiculous at this point. I mean, that you have to put things like the Pat McAfee show and mandatory practices like as part of the deal to get Aaron Rodgers in your building. I mean, just shows you the state of the Jets at this point in time. I mean, I think the more interesting thing, Nick, and I'd be curious your thoughts, is like, all right, so like, what are the Jets going to do at quarterback now?
Yeah.
I think they have Tyrod Taylor, who's on the roster, who's not a terrible sort of bridge guy type of guy. Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr are options if they get released where they are. Justin Fields and Russell Wilson will be free agents. The draft, I don't think the Jets are in position to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think Sam Darnold's coming back to New York or anything like that. But that's what I just don't see a path to a quarterback for the Jets, and that's a terrible place to be in. It's where the Patriots were sort of in like the Cam Newton year, like after Tom Brady. We all know how that went. But yeah, they're in a tough spot.
Yeah, they've got the 7th pick in the draft, so we'll see what people are saying as we get closer to the draft. Does that give them an opportunity to draft somebody? Do they like somebody enough to draft that person? The Kirk Cousins idea is an interesting one, especially given the fact they just had to deal with a quarterback coming off the Achilles and it didn't quite go well, and you wonder if they would want to do that again. I have no idea. One guy that you could look at, possibly Greg, and it depends on what happens in LA, but one guy you could look at is Matthew Stafford. Would Stafford be an option if the Rams decide that they can't afford him anymore, they want to move on from Stafford, which would beg the question, what would LA do at quarterback? Would they look at Kirk Cousins? It's really the same names, though, and I agree with you. I think this tells you how badly the Jets wanted to at least start looking like a serious football program, and Aaron Glenn saying, I'm not going to deal with the Aaron Rodgers BS. I'm not going to deal with the drama. I'm not going to deal with him going on Pat McAfee and saying things that we don't want him saying, or just being a distraction. We're not going to be held hostage by the distraction anymore. And so I think the distraction was such a pain in the ass that they're willing to walk into the offseason with a question at the most important position on the field. And so if I'm Garrett Wilson, I'm waking up going, okay, so who's my quarterback? And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Jets. Another news item, Greg. Matt Patricia goes to The Ohio State University to be the defensive coordinator. My first question to you is there any way on God's green earth that Matt Patricia gets this job if it wasn't for his relationship with Bill Belichick?
Yeah, of course not. I mean, what's interesting, the interesting thing to me about this is, is Bill going to help him at all? I mean, because, I assume, do we know where Steve Belichick's going? Is he going with his dad? Do we know that yet?
Yep. He's at North Carolina.
Okay. Yeah. So, I'm sure Matt Patricia talked to both Bill and Steve about this, because we know Steve was at the University of Washington and actually did a good job with that defense, improved it. From what I understand, Bill helped out a lot, helped Steve out a lot from afar. He was out there at certain times at practices. Like, are the Belichicks now not an option for Matt Patricia to, sort of talk to, even in the offseason, to prepare? Will he be an option, a sounding board, maybe a little bit during the season to them? Because that's what I'm interested in seeing. And we know this Patriots defense, especially when Matt Patricia was running the defense. I wouldn't call it the most exotic, and also not the greatest in space or against speed. More of a slug it out type of defense, a physical defense. Does that play in the college game? I think it's going to be fascinating, especially on that level. I mean, he is going to have ridiculous athletes to use at Ohio State. I mean, it's almost like the 33rd NFL team at this point. But I'll be interested to see how his scheme does at the college level.
All right, last NFL note that we want to get to as far as headlines. Cincinnati linebacker Germaine Pratt has requested a trade. If you are Mike Vrabel, Elliot Wolf, are you interested?
Quite possibly. we're talking about Germaine Pratt's a guy who is a little under 6'3", 250 pounds, ran a 4.5 coming out. I really like the player. Not really a middle linebacker. I don't think he would be a Juwan Bentley replacement or something like that. More like a weak side linebacker type of guy. Could they use that in the scheme? Yes. How much are you willing to give up? How much contract do you have to give him? But I've always liked him. He's a good player. I wouldn't say he's not the greatest coverage linebacker in the world, and he's been sort of declining the past couple of years. I mean, I can't tell how much that is him. Is that the Bengals defense overall, which has gone downhill to where Louis Amaruno got fired this season. We saw them early on in the season, but yeah, it's certainly a guy I would look at. It's tough getting linebackers from the college game to come in, and there aren't that many that are immediately impactful. And it seems like Vrabel likes the veteran type of guys on defense. But yeah, if it's reasonable and the contract is reasonable, yeah, it's something I would look at.
Yeah, 250 pounds. One of the things that I'm sure we're going to talk about more as we move forward this offseason, Greg, is the defensive scheme of Vrabel / Terrell Williams and how that differs from what we've seen here in New England for the last several years. And one of the differences is the size of linebackers. You look at Tavai, who's 255. You look at Bentley, who's 250. Taki's 245. Christian Ellis is 231. And if you look at the linebackers that played in Tennessee under Vrabel, Jack Gibbons was 242. Al Shire was 228. David Long was 225. Rashaan Evans was 232. So usually, I mean, Harold Landry is 252, but he's a pass rusher, kind of end of the line guy. So what that would tell us is Tennessee banked on smaller linebackers, not really necessarily in the 250 range unless you were going to pass rush. So it'll be interesting. Pratt is 29 years old in May. I wonder if they'd be willing to pay a 29-year-old. He's got a $7.9 million cap hit for 2025. So we'll see what happens. He'll probably end up with Anarumo, I would imagine, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. Before we get to more, Greg wants to tell you about Prize Picks.
You bet I do. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. I love it. I love sitting down for a game, getting my picks in, and then rooting for them during one game. I can't do this multi-game thing. I have to be focused. And Prize Picks, the app, is awesome. Allows me to do that. All-Star Weekend is almost here, and Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players during the game and the Saturday night events like the three-point contest. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Speaking of that, here's sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Think Steph Curry will get more than 5 3-pointers next week. Giannis for more than 35 points. Cook up your Nick Cattles-ish hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
I was a little bummed. I saw that Ionescu versus Curry was not going to happen this All-Star weekend. Apparently, the negotiations fell through. That's a bummer. I thought last year that was a lot of fun to watch. All right, back to football. Super Bowl. You watched the film. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so, in a big assist to JT O'Sullivan over at the QB school, he had his Mahomes analysis was on his Patreon feed, which I'm a member of, trying to educate myself. His Jalen Hurts sort of selective plays from Jalen Hurts are available for free on his YouTube page. The film, it really didn't show anything different. you know what was hilarious, Nick, was so first I watched the Mahomes film, which was most of the game. He sped through the end when the game was over. And then you watched the Jalen Hurts video, and just the pocket difference was like, it was like night and day. I mean, it just, how much pressure the Eagles got, how the Chiefs got whooped at the point of attack, the Travis Kelce, just whiffing on multiple blocks.
Yeah.
Pacheco, the backs couldn't block either. The coverage in the back end, how good it was for the Eagles, their match zone. And, really the big thing, there were some plays to be made for the Chiefs, and they dialed up some things, but because the Eagles played mostly sort of quarters with match zone principles, what happens is that the two deep safeties like cheat down. They were taking away the middle of the field. They were like, they're not beating us in the middle of the field. And the way to combat that, and they had chances a couple of times, which is basically like, you get those safeties to bite on whether it's Kelce or Hollywood Brown, who's freaking horrible. And I'll be surprised if he's back on that team. Good God, they weren't good. It's amazing to me that they got to that place. But then to go over the top with like an Xavier Worthy, and they had those plays a couple times, but most of the time, like something happened, like the pressure got there. Like it was just a bad day at the office. And then you look at Jalen Hurts and you watch his film, and he could have a snack back there most of the time. I mean, it wasn't perfect all the time. I mean, he made it was a 2nd down and 10 play where I think he threw it to Devontae Smith, and Chris Jones was right in his face. And you look at it and you're just like, that's unbelievable. That's playing with poise, all that stuff. But I also think you're afforded that, or at least Hurts was, as opposed to Mahomes, because he wasn't under pressure most of the time. And so on those rare occasions where a guy does flash in your face, you're not sort of crapping your pants. And that happened at times, like with Mahomes. I remember, one time Josh Sweat came from the inside and he just flashed. It was picked up. But because of what had happened earlier in the game, Mahomes was like, oh crap, and sort of like scrambled outside the pocket. So that it sort of just confirmed what we saw. I think this Eagles team, again, when they got to Super Bowl Sunday, where they were at this point, they were a underrated wagon. I think they were really good, and I just think it was a complete mismatch that I wish I was clued in a little bit more on. But I think that the Chiefs really, they have to figure some things out. I mean, assuming they get Rice back, Xavier Worthy will be better year 2, but they got to come up with some other options. They need a real threat at running back. Obviously, the offensive line. They're going to need an upgrade at tight end over Kelce. Kelce, at this point, if he comes back, he could be like a number 2 guy, but he can't be the main guy anymore. So there's a lot of work that the Chiefs have to do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about their window. I know some people are questioning whether or not their window is closing. And I think when you have Andy Reid and Brett Veach and Mahomes, you're still in really good shape with those 3 guys. And, of course, you could add Spagnuolo to the list at DC. But they're going to have to go through some things here, I believe. Mm-hmm. The roster is aging. You mentioned, you look at the fact that Worthy is going to get better. Is he a 1? I don't know if he's a 1. Rashee Rice, I don't know what to make of that dude off the field. A bunch of issues. Yeah. I would not feel confident in any way that he's gonna be able to get his act together and stay dependable for you on the football field. They don't have a left tackle unless Kingsley Suamataia really develops and steps up during the offseason, because he was wretched last year. Trey Smith, one of their other better offensive linemen, he's a free agent. Do they bring him back? And then you start looking at age. Chris Jones is 30, 31 years old. Mm-hmm. He has dominated. He's getting older. How does that impact the defense in totality? They've got a lot of questions. You mentioned Kelce. I think he's going to retire. I do think he'll end up retiring at some point this offseason. So they have to figure out tight end. So there's a lot of questions for Kansas City as far as, this roster goes. And the other thing I would question is whether or not Patrick Mahomes, I don't want to say declining. That's way too dramatic. But I think I mentioned this earlier in the week. His last 2 years, statistically, he has taken a step back. And some of that is weapons, certainly. But he has relied on his athleticism an awful lot and his raw talent. And if that starts to kind of decline, that's also a concern. So it's going to be an interesting offseason in Kansas City, Greg.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, they're going to have to get back to basics and figure things out, starting with the protection. I mean, I think, when you look at how the two Super Bowl that they've lost in blowout fashion, to me, it's all about, they had offensive line issues big time. And this year was just even worse. I'm not sure how they were able to wallpaper over it. And winning so many close games like they did, probably was, a little bit of fool's gold and funky. And, they just got exposed by, a better team that I think, like I said last time, I think we all slept on this team and about how good. I mean, talking with Aaron Schatz, I know he put it out there on Twitter that, if you look at this Eagles team, this Eagles defense from week 6 on, they're like number 7 all-time defense since 1978. Not just Super Bowl teams. I mean, we're talking the 84 and 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens. Like they were in that conversation, and they were so deep, up front. And then once they got down Fangio's scheme in the back end, that match zone, they just became great. And I think that, you look at the offense, I understand it's tough. You could probably cherry pick from any team's seasons, but we're looking at like, what was the team on Super Bowl Sunday that the Chiefs faced? And well, if you look at the Eagles over the whole for the season, they're 2-2 start, and then losing Jalen Hurts for like 3 games with concussions. Like a lot of their like DVOA are sort of thrown off by that. But like, when they were healthy and at their best, and once they dedicated themselves to running the ball and just being like Saquon and Jalen Hurts take care of the ball, I think this was a fantastic team, and kudos to Howie Roseman for how he built it. And I do think it's a model for the Patriots going forward. How much money these guys have pushed into the future. Yeah, the bill's going to come due at some point in time, but they're pretty formidable right now.
All right, Greg, tell the listeners about Factor.
Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has made chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals based on a randomized, controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise, with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week. It's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from the preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto, which is the ones I get. Factor, you can help feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. For example, the creamy pesto pork chop that I had last week with spinach, cauliflower rice, roasted green beans. Phenomenal seasoning. I say it all the time. I'm blown away by how good their sauces is, how on point the seasoning is. Call to action: eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off and use code Bedard50 off to get 50% off your first box with plus free shipping. That's code Bedard50 off at factormeals.com/Bedard50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
All right, let's start talking about this offseason. Pro Football Focus released their top free agent rankings recently. Greg, I wanted your thoughts, issues, some agreements that you may have with this list. What stood out to you?
Well, number one is T. Higgins, and I think we can all agree about that. I mean, there seems to be a lot of conversation, whether it's Joe Burrow talking, during Super Bowl week about like, why can the Eagles do this and we can't do that? I mean, good luck, Joe, dealing with the Brown family. You'll now realize that the Brown family is not Jeffrey Lurie. So that's going to be rough. And I also wonder if, I think this is a crucial offseason for, Joe Burrow and the Bengals in the sense that, you look back to what Carson Palmer went through. I mean, he got so frustrated at the end that he forced a trade to Arizona. Could that be coming for Joe Burrow 2-3 years down the road?
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule that out. So, guys on this list that I would be interested in for the Patriots: T. Higgins, Javon Holland, of course, the safety from Miami. When we talk about wide receivers, I do think Chris Godwin coming off an injury, but could be somebody that the Patriots are interested in. Ronnie Stanley, of course, at tackle. I do have the feeling from reading some of what Eric DeCosta has said, I would not be surprised if the Ravens let him go and get the comp pick. I think, they could move Rosengarten over to left tackle so he could get out there. I don't know if I'm interested in big money edge guys like, Josh Sweat, Rasul Douglas at cornerbacks are right. Just Aaron Jones at running back, Carlton Davis at cornerback, Hufanga, whatever his name is, from the 49ers. Definitely interesting guy. So this is stuff we'll be talking about all off season, but yeah, that stuff's starting to get ramped up.
I watched a lot of Hufanga when I was out in Sacramento when he playing for the Niners. A number of different injuries have kind of derailed him a bit, but he is, man, oh man, he just runs around and he makes plays. He gives up plays. He's a devastating hitter. He's an exciting player. So that's an interesting name. Some observations, 5 wide receivers in the top 15 on this list. That sounds great, but when you start looking into it, I don't know. DeAndre Hopkins is obviously long in the tooth at this point. We wanted him in New England, Greg, you and I, a couple of years ago. He's now into his 30s. Stephon Diggs is on this list in the top 15. He's coming off ACL surgery. Amari Cooper is on this list. He's somebody that I still like. He hasn't done much in Buffalo since that trade, but Cooper kind of has my eye a little bit. Chris Godwin, you mentioned, coming off the injury, and then you got T. Higgins. And, I'll continue to say it. I will believe it when I see it, that Higgins and Jamar Chase are both going to get paid by Mike Brown. I need to see that happen before I go, yeah, that makes sense. I don't care what Joe Burrow says. I don't care about Instagram posts and all this other stuff. Mike Brown's going to have to pay Jamar Chase as one of the top 2 or 3 wide receivers, and then also pay T. Higgins enough money for T. Higgins to justify not walking into the free agency market. Again, I'll believe it when I see it. Observation number 2, you mentioned him, Javon Holland. I'm all in. I'm on the Javon Holland train.
Yep.
Ronnie Stanley is number 11 on this list. You mentioned him. He's obviously bringing in some big time headlines around this area as far as podcasts go. Josh Sweat's an interesting name. He's been dinged up a lot. A name I didn't see, and I think he's pretty much way down the list, which is really interesting, is Zach Bond. I think Zach Bond is a name that could be a big impact player for the Patriots, but he's not even in the top 40, which is shocking to me. Also shocking to me is Cam Robinson. I know this is somebody who a lot of people have talked about, and he has the history with Doug Marrone, but they have Cam Robinson 17th on this list. I believe he gave up 12 pressures individually in that playoff game. I don't know how Cam Robinson sneaks in the top 20. And Greg, there are 4 offensive guards on this list from 21 to 41. I wanted to ask you, because Trey Smith is one of the top free agents on this board. If you're the Patriots, do you look interior offensive line? Obviously, the tackle positions we're going to talk about a lot, and we already know that is pretty much what it is. But are you okay? Are you okay with Robinson and Cole Strange and some of the other names, or do you think they also have to look at the interior of that offensive line?
I think, Nick, I think my answer would be like, it's all part of the same puzzle. You just got to figure out how the pieces are going to fit. I mean, look, would, I think a smart thing would be paying for left tackle, figure out right tackle, whether it's Caden Wallace or somebody else, or you bring in some sort of, um, maybe more journeyman or another draft pick this year, whether it's, ideally it's if you could sign Ronnie Stanley, trade down, draft a Will Cooper or Kelvin Banks or somebody like that. I wouldn't be opposed to spending at guard. I mean, I just think the lessons that we've learned, and I don't know if they've learned them, but with the attrition that happens on the offensive line, like if I don't know, like we know Owenu is going to be a starter. We don't know what's going to happen at center. We don't know what's going to happen at left guard. Um, I don't know how much I'm willing to go big money at guard, but getting a starting caliber guy, yeah, that would be something I'd be interested in.
Talking about big money, you might have to spend big money if your furnace craps the bed. Greg, tell the fine people that are listening and or watching about Noturno and how they helped you out.
As someone who spent years covering football, I know what it takes to be a winning team. It's all about reliability, precision, and showing up when it matters most. When it came to my own home and my heating system, I needed a team I could count on, and Noturno Home Services delivered. Noturno is local. They are family-owned and family-focused and have been servicing the greater Boston area for 15 years. From start to finish, they made the process of upgrading my heating system seamless and stress-free, and they go above and beyond, hooking me up with a free valve to get me through. My whole home was freezing, and the professionalism that they displayed the entire time was unbelievable. Noturno isn't just about heating. They are my go-to for plumbing, cooling, and even water and air quality solutions. They've got the expertise to handle whatever your home needs. Here's the best part. You can get 10% off your next service with Noturno. That could save you up to $1,000 on your next project. Just visit noturnohome.com/Bedard. That's NOTTURNO home.com/Bedard for all the details and conditions. Take advantage now. These deals won't last forever. If you're looking for a team that puts your comfort first, visit noturnohome.com/Bedard. I trust Noturno, and you should too.
Don't forget to trust Greg as well with the Patriots coverage, $50 for the year at BSJ, along with Mike Giardi. You can also download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. And you can eat smart with Factor. Factormeals.com/Bedard50 off. Use that code Bedard50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Let's wrap things up with the draft, Greg. Obviously, the combine is a couple of weeks away. We are still 2+ months away from the draft. But right now, Patriots sitting at 4. On February 13th, Greg, how are you feeling about the 4th pick? What are your kind of instincts about what the Patriots might do, what you would want to see them do?
Yeah, I'm still rooting for, whether it's Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter or Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders, that somebody is there at 4 that somebody else wants. And the Patriots can trade down a little bit, pick up a little bit of capital, and really focus on the lines like we talked about last time. From what I understand from talking to people, the emphasis this offseason, and it might not be flashy and people might not like it, and they might not get any fantasy guys that they can pick for the Patriots, outside of Drake May and what have you, but they gotta eat their vegetables, and they gotta beef up the lines, because if you can't protect the quarterback, if you can't run the ball effectively, if you can't stop the run, if you can't get after the quarterback, you got nothing. I don't care what you have on the outside. I don't care what flashy players you have. If you can't do those things, you're not going to do anything. And that's where the rebuild, the retooling of this Patriots team needs to start. You got to prioritize protecting Drake May and giving him a running game that other people are going to respect. I think the move to Josh McDaniels for a guy like Ramondre Stevenson is going to be really good. For him, the run's going to be schemed up every week. It's going to be sound. They're not going to ask them to do stupid stuff that they can't block. They're going to get back to, let's make sure we're getting positive stuff, positive yardage every time. And I think they're going to be good at that. So I want somebody to come up for number 4 and trade back a little bit. And, whether it's Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks or Mason Graham on the defensive line from Michigan, I want to get a building block, a foundational block for this team up front to start basically solving the ills that we had towards the end of the Belichick regime.
If Abdul Carter can somehow fall to 4, which I don't think is going to happen, then I think you run that pick up to the podium and you pick him and you say, all right, we got a guy that can get after the quarterback. And even if he gives you 70%, 75% of what Micah Parsons is eventually, if you get that from him in year 2, year 3, you feel great about that pick. The Travis Hunter thing is interesting because at least for the combine purposes, they have him listed as a cornerback. I know Mike Giardi reported, well, I don't know if reported, he at least tweeted out that from what he has heard, Hunter will run some drills at wide receiver. I still have questions about that. Like if he's going to be a full-time corner, if he's going to devote himself to corner, you've already got Gonzalez. I don't know if I'd lean against drafting Hunter at 4 if he's going to be a cornerback. I would, like you said, Greg, I'd be focusing on the line of scrimmage. So it depends on what is offered to you to trade down and how far you got to trade down. The more I read about Will Campbell, the more I watch, the more I start to fall in love with him. So the arm measurement, I'm sure you and I are going to talk a lot of arm measurement, Greg, over the next couple months. But if he measures 33 inches or more, or if he is just slightly under 33 inches, man, it'll be very tough to turn down Will Campbell. Just seems like the Mike Vrabel type player.
I agree. I mean, he reminds me a little bit of Taylor Lewan, who they had in Tennessee. And my question is Will Campbell right now, is he doing like the Bobby Brady, like hanging from the swing set right now, trying to lengthen himself? Because boy, that arm measurement is going to be big at the combine.
All right, that'll do it for this week. We will be back next week. Let's see what happens over the weekend, if anything does. Everybody enjoy yourself this weekend. Be safe, be well. And until next time, we'll talk to you.